From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We've got a great show ahead for you today. Of course, St. Patrick's Day is upon us. We'll be celebrating just like all the other O' people out there, celebrating our big feast day. So happy St. Patrick's Day to all the people with a little bit of Irish heritage in them. So that's a lot of people here in the United States, but hopefully you can celebrate the big day in a good way. And we've got a great interview with Mike Aquilina. We'll be talking about St. Patrick, and we'll be talking about his many miracles, including the claims that he raised people from the dead. And later in the show, we're going to be talking with Scott L. Smith. He's the author of a brand new book from Sophia Institute, and that's Near-Death Experiences. It's a book that just came out, and they're called NDEs. And we might say this is something similar to UFOs, or maybe we won't, especially when we consider that some fairly prominent people, some saints and mystics, and otherwise have had claims of NDEs, near-death experiences. So this is a very Catholic book. We'll be looking forward to talking with Scott later in the program about this incredible phenomenon, which I have some interest in. I think it can shed some light on some things, so stay tuned for that. Later in the show, we'll be talking a little bit about They Might Be Saints, and of course this connects to my television series, They Might Be Saints, which airs on EWTN Weekly. So on March 16th on Sunday at 1:30 p.m., we'll be looking at the life of Father Al Schwartz. And canonization candidate Father Al Schwartz dedicated his life to working with the poorest of the poor, establishing youth programs and founding religious orders that still serve his worldwide mission long after his death. And that's They Might Be Saints, Father Aloysius Schwartz, Sunday, March 16th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. And also coming up is my program on Lay Low, on the series Explore with the Miracle Hunter. It airs March 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I investigate the supernatural experiences of Benedicta Rencourel. In 1664, the Virgin Mary gave her messages about prayer for the conversion of sinners and visited her throughout the rest of her life. And that is Explore with the Miracle Hunter, Lay Low in France, coming up on March 22nd. And every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time will be a new episode of Explore with the Miracle Hunter. And if you don't want to watch my show, but you'd rather go see how the shows are made, or at least go on a pilgrimage to the places where we film, you can go on a Jubilee year pilgrimage to Milan, Turin, Florence, and Rome. You can join me for the canonization of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. The dates on that are July 28th through August 4th. And we go to the places of saints and miracles, of course. We'll see Marian apparition sites and visit the Duomo in Milan. Turin, we'll see the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, where the Shroud of Turin is held. We'll walk in the footsteps of Pier Giorgio Frassati and see the places where St. John Bosco had his famous visions. And we'll go to Florence to see many great artists there, Dante, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, Botticelli, Donatello. We'll see various artworks, including the David and the site of the apparition of the Virgin Mary to the 7 holy founders of the Servites. And we'll finish up in Rome to see the many incredible sites around the Vatican, finish with the canonization of one of the great modern saints, Pier Giorgio Frassati. So check that one out. Go to pilgrimages.com/miraclehunter to find out more about this incredible pilgrimage going from July 28th through August 4th. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today's day, we have Blessed John Adalbert Balicki from 1869 to 1848. He lived in Poland. In the 365 Days with Mary project, we look at the icon of the Mother of God enthroned, Kolomskoye in Russia in the year 1917. And the question of the week, why is there such great variability in Marian apparition sightings? And the miracle of the day is in 1955, there were apparitions reported in South Africa. We'll be talking about that in just a little bit. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we report on the miracles happening around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And for those people who want to catch up on these things, you can go to my Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. You can like it and join and see some of these supernatural occurrences that we report and things that relate to miracles. And one of the interesting things that's happened in the past 12 months or so, as we see the Vatican releasing a bunch of new statements related to some older apparitions or claims of apparitions, where the Vatican has kind of tuned up its statements about these things. And so we saw a new statement coming out of Rome just this week, where the Holy See said Maria Valtorta's works are literary, but not supernatural. And so the Catholic Church does not recognize as supernatural the visions, revelations, and messages of the mystic Maria Valtorta, who lived from 1897 to 1961. And the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith issued a brief communique to this effect, published on its website on February 22nd, 2025. You can go to the Facebook page of the Miracle Hunter to see their actual document. It's very short. And so this Italian woman's writings still have a certain amount of popularity, even though they're placed on the Index of Forbidden Books in 1959 and have been criticized by the Holy See on several occasions since then. And so the Dicastery explained that it wanted to publish this note after having been frequently asked about the Church's position on Maria Valtorta's writings. And in particular, it cites her book, The Gospel as Revealed to Me, a work in 10 volumes, which in the Italian recounts the story of the life of Christ in her own words. And it's also known as the Poem of the Man-God. That's kind of the famous name of that. And so, of course, we know that only the 4 canonical Gospels are divinely inspired. And so these alleged visions, revelations, and messages contained in the writings of Maria Valtorta, or in any case attributed to them, cannot be considered of supernatural origins, states the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. They should be considered simply as literary forms that the author used to narrate the life of Jesus in her own way. So that was the explanation coming out of Rome. And we see various condemnations of this Poem of the Man-God, 1943, 1951, 1959. So there have been Cardinal Ratzinger, for example, when he was with the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he warned against the damage caused by this text of Maria Valtorta. So we've seen a long history of negative judgments against this, but in a formal way, as the Church has done in any number of cases, it has released a new statement related to Maria Valtorta's work, Poem of the Man-God. So if you want to read more about that, you can connect to the Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we ask a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer that writes in with the fastest with the correct answer. People who know me, my friends, they know I love trivia, so you might catch me on a random night playing pub trivia somewhere, but we're talking about Catholic pub trivia here. So last week we talked about the Holy Face devotion, and it stems from the scene of St. Veronica wiping the face of Jesus, and what has she become known as the patron saint of? And the answer to that question is photography. And she has, as all saints do, she has various patronages, but that is one of the popular ones because it was something like a photograph of Jesus' face, according to the tradition, where the face appeared on the cloth. So this week, we're talking about St. Patrick ahead of his feast day this coming week. And St. Patrick is one of 5 patron saints of Ireland. St. Bridget is another. And the question is, name any one of the other 3. So the popular ones, of course, are Patrick and Bridget, but do you know the others? And so name any of the other 3 patron saints of Ireland. Send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and the answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I'm sure you've heard of this before. We've seen this in movies, and perhaps we've seen reports of this, or maybe even people you know have claimed something like this. We're talking about near-death experiences, abbreviated to be NDEs. And this is something that's been claimed over the centuries even. This is not something that's modern. This is something that many people have said that they've had some experience of approaching death and seeing something fascinating and coming back to be able to report it. And so many people who look at NDEs, they look at them skeptically perhaps. They treat them like UFOs or something else. That's something not to be regarded. But what if I were to tell you that there were There's been numerous saints and mystics throughout Christian history, and even in the Bible we have some references to what could be considered NDEs. Would that change your opinion? Well, there's a brand new book that's out from Sophia Institute Press. I'm really excited about this one. It's called Near-Death Experiences, and it's written by author Scott L. Smith. Welcome to the program today, Scott.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to talk about this. This is such an interesting topic, especially to look at it from a Catholic angle. I think that's kind of important to frame it that way. But for people who are kind of new to this topic or maybe are skeptical of the topic, what are we talking about here? What is an NDE? What is a near-death experience?
Sure. So the modern definition, in terms of today and right now, and even what medical science is beginning to research and describe, there's a number of characteristics of a near-death experience. Part of that is the out-of-body experience, disembodiment, this perception of being apart from your physical body. Then there's that tunnel experience, right? The light at the end of the tunnel, passing through a tunnel, which I think is so fascinating because, how does one think about the tunnel experience? When you're leaving this life, if you're passing through a tunnel, it's a lot like the way you entered this life, right? To the birth canal. There's also the intense light, right, at the end of the tunnel, some kind of mystical experience, an experience of joy. And that's where a medical NDE begins to separate from what we know from our what I would say more comprehensive, more full Catholic understanding, is because sometimes it's not a joyous experience. Sometimes in NDEs, you might go to not just heaven, but hell or purgatory, right? So it's not always joy.
When we talk about these, is this what is the sort of scientific backing to these? What kind of modern medical research has been done that looks at some of these cardiac and comatose patients where they've actually documented some of this?
Yeah, and that's a fascinating newer topic, and I love that medical science is beginning to allow themselves to see the world from more of a supernatural lens. I think we've been just hyper empiricists, right? Everything has to be proven in a petri dish. Some things can't be, but you can still use science to learn about them. And so there's multiple studies out now. One is the AWARE study, the AWARE 2 study. These studies are taking place on multiple continents and longitudinal studies. They set up, typically it's cardiac units, because that's where you have a good bit of near-death experiences that can be studied. And what happens is they'll set up a hospital room, in such a way that if you're seeing this room from above, if you're having that out-of-body experience, you'll see things that a person would never see from their hospital bed. Like they'll put a picture on the top shelf lying flat, and so you'd only see, you don't even know it was there if you're seeing yourself from above. And so it's not a insignificant number of people that experience near-death experience. I think people tend to think it's rare, but in the medical studies, there are it's close to 10% of people in these cardiac units, right? That's kind of a subset of the population, but it's a good bit of people. And then, the number of people who will be interviewed and remember them, that's a little bit lower. That's another fascinating part of this, is sometimes people don't remember what happened to them until months or even weeks later. The memories start coming back. So very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, this is amazing. I think that when you talk about the photo placed on the top of a cabinet, that makes it sort of an objectively verifiable situation. This is not something where people are having some sort of experience at the end of their life and their memories are flooding and everybody at the end has this. This is some sort of objectively verifiable thing that's happening. Now, the question that everybody wants to know is, for people who report near-death experiences, especially people who not only can kind of see themselves from above or whatever, but they actually go to heaven, hell, or purgatory, are the reports that people are coming back with, do they sync up? Or is there some confluence in these reports that we can say that there is a heaven and that people are having that same experience?
And I think that's why it was so important for us to have a book out there that treats of this subject comprehensively from a Catholic point of view, because so many, excuse me, because so many of the books out there, really all the books out there on near-death experiences, they collect contemporary accounts, but a Catholic treatment of this is going to be far more expansive, right? There's all the history, thousands of years of history, but if not for the Catholic accounts, you have basically non-denominational evangelical accounts of this phenomenon that they notice sometimes people that are waiting to get to heaven, but they just kind of skip over that, right? Because they don't really have the organ developed theologically to understand purgatory. Some of the newer kinds of Protestants aren't necessarily anti-purgatory. It's just not something they even really talk about. So that's something that, we can cover as Catholics and understand and really can analyze. Not only that, you have, I cover Father Stephen Shire's account of his near-death experience in the book. He's a priest, and he encounters the Blessed Mother, right? He's at the particular judgment, and his judgment is hell, even though, he's a priest, which is kind of shocking. But then he hears this beautiful, soft, feminine voice advocating on his behalf, which is just, to me, is so beautiful. And I'm a lawyer, but I don't want F. Lee Bailey, I don't want Johnny Cochran, right, as my attorney, or Daniel Webster. If you've ever read the book, The Devil and Daniel Webster, I want the Blessed Mother as my advocate in that greatest of courts, right? So there's so many beautiful Catholic elements that really have not been pursued because they have not been pursued by Catholics.
We've been talking today with Scott L. Smith, author of the new book, Near-Death Experiences, from Sophia Institute Press. And if you were to sort of rattle off some of the points of congruence between people's reports of heaven, what are the experiences that our people are coming back to tell about?
One of the things is really interesting, something that has always piqued my curiosity. Maybe that's not even a strong enough word for it. I've always been interested in the beatific vision, right? Because this is going to be our eternity, hopefully. All those of us that make it to heaven or even purgatory, eventually we're going to have an eternity beholding God in the beatific vision. And the I don't know, I guess maybe more pathetic parts of me think, well, how can I do that for an eternity? That seems like a long time to do anything, So I love it when these people that experience this, a foretaste of this, that aren't experiencing hell, describe the beatific vision. And so we have a priest in the book, Father Cedric, who describes what it's like to experience that beatific vision. It's difficult to describe these things. Even St. Paul, we talk about his possible near-death experience. St. Paul said he completely lacked the language to describe what he saw in heaven. And that's kind of a common problem. If St. Paul can't do it, how am I going to do it? But Father Cedric, I think he described some aspects of beatific vision that were compelling. He talked about the joy, that intense joy, and even joy is too paltry a word to describe this, but that radiating through his body, like waves just radiating through his body. And we say his body, but he was out of his body at the time. It was just his soul. And so that intense joy, that unexplainable joy that those who get this kind of experience get to feel, they're doing it bodiless, right? They're doing it out of their bodies. And that's why it's our Catholic understanding of the resurrection of the body is so important. And really, that's where the rubber hits the road, is because when the body is reunited with the soul, the feeling, either the intense joy or the intense suffering of hell, right? Because those in hell also experience the resurrection of the body. Is that joy, that suffering is magnified and multiplied through the body. So all of that, I think, is fascinating to view through this lens of a near-death experience.
Absolutely. I think it's pretty important to keep the framework Catholic, and I think in your book, it's really nicely done how you lay out these biblical references to near-death experiences, but you also bring in some very modern examples. We're talking about Saint Therese of Lisieux, Saint Faustina Kowalska, Padre Pio. These are all people that we believe are in heaven with God, and so having their reports of a near-death experience, we might take them a little bit more seriously. Talk about the saints and what they say about near-death experiences.
And that was one of the hardest parts about writing this book, is you can't tell all the stories. Like Padre Pio alone, with the various near-death or near-death experiences he's been involved in. You could write whole books, multiple books just about that. So, and the one that I could not take out of the book, even though it wasn't a precise near-death experience, St. Teresa of Avila was a clear-cut near-death experience, but St. Therese of Lisieux, I can't say no to St. Therese. So she has this beautiful story. She's in more of an oppression, like a demonic oppression kind of state. But this is a story of Our Lady of the Smile. The statue of the Blessed Mother in the Martin family, there is a copy of the same statue upon which the image of Mary on the miraculous medal was based. And when she was finally freed of this state, when her sister entered Carmel, she, for a year afterwards until Holy Week, she experienced this. You could say near death, and that's why it's included. But it's more of a sickness, a terrible sickness, and a darkness and oppression. But the Blessed Mother, that statue, when she was finally freed of this supernaturally, that statue the Blessed Mother turned to her and smiled. And it's just, people don't often hear this about a Marian apparition to Saint Therese of Lisieux. So that story is just so like Therese, just so beautiful in such a simple way. I had to include it. Saint Teresa of Avila, on the other hand, she was dead for 4 days. They had put wax on her eyes, and they had said her funeral mass, and they had already prepared her tomb. And her father was like, "No, you can't do this. She's not gone. She might be dead, but she's not gone." Like, no, everybody thought her father was crazy, and he ultimately persevered in preventing her from being buried. But Saint Teresa had an experience of hell. She had kind of a far-reaching experience, because she was also shown what she could accomplish in this life. All the monasteries, all the Carmels that she would establish in her life, but she was given an experience of hell that is, reading about it, writing about it, it stays with you, the way she describes it. This inability to take a deep breath because she's confined in this tiny hole, in the earth, and she's suffering the intense suffering that she's experiencing in a glimpse of hell. But she calls it one of the singular graces and favors from God she experienced in her whole life. This is Saint Teresa, who, her interior castle, her heart, when she eventually did die, her heart was revealed to have been physically pierced by God's love. And that incorrupt heart is still available for us to see. And she said, this woman who had been espoused to Christ himself, said one of the greatest favors she had ever received was an experience of hell. Because that's the point of a near-death experience, is that it changes you. and you have a different standard now, but you are able to see farther than other people can and can help people.
Amazing. We've been talking today with Scott L. Smith about his new book. The name of the book is Near-Death Experiences. We've been talking today with its author, Scott L. Smith. It's a book from Sophia Institute Press. People can go to Sophia Institute or online, anywhere Catholic books are sold. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining us on today's program.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
God bless.
We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. We've got a great question coming in today from Jim. Jim asks, Dear Miracle Hunter, how do we account for the great variability in Marian sightings? The number of appearances, the languages spoke, different outfits, etc. Thank you, Jim. Well, thanks, Jim, for your great question. And it's a good one. We see many claims of Marian apparitions throughout Christian history. The number is something like 2,500, allegedly claims that coming in from around the world. But as far as cases that have actually been approved by church authorities, we have something a little bit less than 30 where local bishops have given their approval of something as being a supernatural event, and perhaps as few as 16 of those have been recognized by the Vatican as being believable. So I think that the numbers are quite small, but when you compare all the cases, they are quite different. We're talking about their locations, the languages spoken, the dress of the Virgin Mary, how many visionaries there are, whether it's just one visionary or a large crowd, perhaps. So we see great variability between these. We talk about Knock, for example, being sort of a strange and different apparition from Ireland, where we have as many as 18 witnesses seeing a vision of the Virgin Mary, accompanied by Joseph, St. John the Apostle, and also an image of Jesus as a lamb. And she ends up giving 0 messages and appears on just one occasion. So why do we see such variability in all these cases? And should Mary look exactly the same in all cases and say exactly the same thing and have the same format, at least in the presentation? Not necessarily. I guess we can say that Mary, as the Mother of God, can do whatever she wants. And perhaps we can see this as she's knowing her audience quite well. She doesn't always appear to shepherd children. She doesn't always appear to popes, even though she's done both. And so she knows her audience when she makes these appearances, and she addresses them in a way that would be best received by them. So does that matter that Mary uses a different language each time? Well, if she's appearing in a different place, of course she would speak the language of the people. Is she wearing a different outfit each time? Yes. Perhaps she's allowed to do that, and perhaps the dress would be most recognizable by the people she was with. If she wore something from a foreign land, perhaps she wouldn't be seen in quite the same way. So it's a question for God when we get to heaven, of course. But as for me, I have no problem with the variety that Mary presents herself as. We see her being the same woman, Mary of Nazareth, the mother of Jesus, the mother of God, presenting messages drawing closer to Christ in a way that's best received by each of the people that she appears in front of. Great question. So thank you so much for your question. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe I'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we look at the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. Believe it or not, there's a different Marian devotion that lines up for every single day. We all know Lourdes, February 11th, or Fatima, May 13th, or Guadalupe, December 12th, but there's a different Marian devotion for each and every day, whether it's a feast day or the building of a basilica or the celebration of a miracle. There's a big way to celebrate Mary each and every day throughout the world. And so for today's day, we've got the icon of the Mother of God enthroned from Kolomskaya in Russia. in the year 1917. The enthroned or reigning icon of the Mother of God appeared on March 15, 1917, or March 2nd on the Old Orthodox calendar, the day of Tsar Nicholas's abdication in the village of Kolomskaya, near Moscow. In February of 1917, an elderly woman named Edokia, she saw the Mother of God in a dream, telling her to go to the Kolomskaya to find a large blackened icon in the church. And after the vision was repeated 3 times, she went there to search for the icon. In the basement of the church, it was covered in dust. This icon of the Pankranta, the seated type of icon, was revealed, and news of the icon's discovery spread throughout Russia, and there were several healing miracles associated with it. And that is the icon of the Mother of God enthroned from Kolomskaya in Russia in the year 1917. For more information on this fascinating devotion, or under any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions from around the world, you can connect to the project at 365dayswithmary.com, pick up the book, or download the free app from the iOS App Store, 365 Days with Mary, Marian Calendar. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. This is also something we do every week, where we find a miracle that happened at some time in Christian history that lines up exactly to the day's date. And so this is a story of an alleged Marian apparition coming from South Africa. And during the time that a Sister Reinolda worked at a Catholic mission hospital in Nongoma, she claimed that she experienced 10 visions of Mary, Tabernacle of the Most High. And on the occasion of March 15, 1956, it was said that at the 4th encounter, Our Lady was claimed to be pointing in a non-westerly direction, and the place of Nome where she was is situated northwest of Nongoma, asking Sister Ronalda that a sanctuary be built at a place where 7 springs well up and meet, and graces would flow from that place, and a great number of people would be converted to return to God. And there were a series of other apparitions, perhaps 6 more after this, but this is a Marian apparition that does not have the full recognition of the Church. Well, no longer does the Church give its full recognition of the supernatural character, but this is a case where that it has been approved for faith expression, which is the highest level that the Church gives anyway these days. But during 1989, Bishop Manuel Bliasse, the local bishop, the diocese in which Nome is situated, and Father Michael Mayer met with this Father Paul de Kock he's the chairperson of the advisory commission of the Bishops' Conference. They discussed this Nome affair. And at their request, Father Paul de Kock, he compiled a statement about Nome in which he said, quote, "There is nothing objectionable in this, in the promotion of the sanctuary at Nome and the veneration of Our Lady under the name of the Tabernacle of the Most High. One does not need divine sanction to start a sanctuary and venerate Our Lady. Pilgrimages could be allowed even if we're not sure of the authenticity of the visions. The content of the visions is doctrinally acceptable. Those views can be put forward in sermons and leaflets." And so again, this is from Father Paul de Kock from the Nome Visions in the Nome file. And this is from South Africa, and one of the very few apparitions in Africa that have any sign of recognition from the Catholic Church. Let's look at They Might Be Saints. This is something we talk about each week. This relates to my television series, which airs weekly on EWTN, and my book, They Might Be Saints, which is available at EWTNRC.com, about all the Americans on the path to sainthood. We're talking about servants of God, venerables, and blesseds before they have all their miracles and are recognized as saints by Rome. And so for the sainthood news, we try to keep you up to date on those people coming down the pipeline in the sainthood process. And we just got news that there will be a new beatification in Chambéry in France, done by Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, taking the place of Pope Francis, of course. This will occur on May 17th of this year. And venerable servant of God Camille Costa de Beauregard, who lived from 1841 to 1910, he was declared venerable in 1991, and this decree was recently promulgated. And for those people who are wondering who this is, Camille Costa de Beauregard, he was a diocesan priest, and he donated all his assets that he inherited from his wealthy family to the needy and to charitable organizations. And for his heroic service to the poor in Savoy, he was called the Father of Orphans. And again, this is Venerable Camille Costa de Beauregard, who, as of May 17th, will become Blessed Camille. And for more information on They Might Be Saints, you can go to my website, theymightbesaints.com. Let's take a look at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today's day, March 15th, we've got Blessed Jan Adalbert Baliszki, who lived from 1869 to 1948 in Poland. He was born on January 25th. That's a pretty good date to be born, if I might say so myself. 1869 in Poland. And he was born to a poor but pious family and around 12 years of school in Rzeszów in Poland with teachers who taught out of love for Polish culture. He entered the seminary in September 1888, and he was ordained in 1892. He became the assistant pastor of Polna, where he was noted as a gifted preacher and man of prayer. And he studied at the Pontifical Gregorian University from 1893 to 97, and he concentrated on St. Thomas Aquinas, spending his evenings in prayer, his free time visiting the shrines of the saints. And he came to believe that science could also lead a man to God. And he became a professor in dogmatic theology at the seminary and a prefect of studies for 3 years. He was the reluctant vice-rector of the seminary in 1927, became the rector in 28, and he was considered the spiritual formation of priests his most important mission, studying reports carefully and praying for help before presenting candidates to the bishop. He was a spiritual director of Blessed Ladislav Findish. In 1934, his failing health forced him to resign from the seminary, but he lived at the seminary, hearing confessions and working as a favorite spiritual director to students. In 1939, when there was the warring German and Soviet forces dividing, Father John stayed in the Soviet sector, hoping to keep the seminary running. Soon, however, he was forced to move from the seminary to the bishop's residence, where he stayed even after the war. In his last years, his health failed and more as his tuberculosis spread, and John was noted for his gentle discernment of people who entered his confessional and his devotion to prayer as a way to know the heart of God. And he died on March 15, 1948, of pneumonia and tuberculosis there in Poland. And he was declared venerable on December 19, 1994 by Pope John Paul II, and he was beatified in 2002 by John Paul II at Krakow. And that is the Might Be Saint of the Day, Blessed Jan Adalbert Baliszki, with one more miracle. He will be declared a saint. And for those people interested in checking out the television series They Might Be Saints, there's an episode that airs this week of They Might Be Saints, Father Aloysius Schwartz. He's a canonization candidate. He dedicated his life to working with the poorest of the poor, establishing youth programs and founding religious orders that still serve his worldwide mission long after his death. That's They Might Be Saints, Father Aloysius Schwartz, from Sunday, March 16th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Mike Aquilina about St. Patrick with his feast day upon us. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. People who know me, and even people who don't know me, they see my last name, the O apostrophe in my last name, and they know this is an Irish guy. And of course, as such, I have a devotion to St. Patrick. And just probably 2 years ago, I went with my film crew to Ireland and England, and we traveled all over the Emerald Isle, going to places like Lough Derg and Croagh Patrick, and all the Irish places related to St. Patrick all over that beautiful country, all in an effort to produce a new television program for EWTN coming out next year called Miracles of St. Patrick. So he's always someone I'm excited to talk about and to think about. That great converter of an entire nation, you might say. And so we're excited today to speak with Mike Aquilina. You all know him. He's the prodigious author of numerous Catholic books, and he's got a new one that's out just in time for St. Patrick's Day. It is called St. Patrick and His World from Scepter Publishers. Welcome back to the program, Mike Aquilina.
Thanks for having me back, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always great to chat with you. And St. Patrick is, if for no other reason than I'm an Irish guy, I love St. Patrick, and his big feast day is coming right up to celebrate. And so you've got a new book, It's St. Patrick and His World. I know you're the author of many, many Catholic books. What got your attention on St. Patrick for this one?
Well, I had COVID a few years back when COVID was something new, and so I was confined to the attic of our house for a little while, and one of the things that I read was something that came in email for me, and it was the doctoral dissertation of a man named Billy Swan, Father Billy Swan, an Irish priest, and he had done his doctoral dissertation on Patrick, and I found it enthralling. You know, he was arguing in his dissertation that Patrick should be recognized as one of the great spiritual masters of the Christian tradition, that he should be recognized as one of the fathers of the church. And by the end of the book, I was a believer. I was persuaded, and I wanted to know more about Patrick. So that drove me into the literature on St. Patrick, the historical literature, about Patrick's ministry and about his personality and about the texts that we have that are attributed to Patrick and what historians say about them. Patrick is kind of like St. Joseph in that, St. Joseph doesn't say anything in the sacred scriptures, so we have to learn about his world in order to understand his actions, and that's how we get to know St. Joseph. Well, Patrick's similar to that. There are only two writings that are universally accepted as authentic writings of Patrick, and they're not long writings. So in order to understand those writings better, we have to understand Patrick's world, and that's what I tried to do first in my reading and then in my writing of this book, to make that world more vivid for people so that they can feel that they know Patrick better.
Wonderful. Well, we're so excited about this book, and if there's so many legends and stories that come to us about St. Patrick, and what can we of course, the things like driving the snakes from Ireland or using the shamrock to talk about the Trinity, those are all debated concepts, things that have been attributed to Patrick in hagiography and otherwise. What do we know about the man? Where did he come from?
Well, he came from northwestern England, probably what's now Carlisle, that area. He gives the name of his village, but we have no other evidence of that village in history, so we don't know where it was. It's likely that it was a small place, a small town, because it made no other mark on history. It must have been a coastal city, or a coastal town, because Patrick was kidnapped in a raid by pirates, and they would not venture too far inland. They would stay close to the coast so that they could get away with their loot and their human cargo, because they wanted to kidnap people to sell as slaves. That's what they did to Patrick. So that's where he was from. He was from Roman Britain, and the important thing to know about the time is that the Roman emperor had not long ago withdrawn all of the military presence from that area. And so this was a new development. Okay, the people of the island considered themselves Roman, all right? They were Roman citizens, and they were proud of that. It was something they really held dear, and it was part of their identity. They were Romans. Well, now Rome has withdrawn their protection, and the pirates arise once again, and they're taking advantage of the people in the coastal lands. It must have seemed like the end of the world. It must have seemed apocalyptic to them that suddenly there's this vulnerability after centuries of Roman protection. So it's a difficult time in history, and I think all of those things play into Patrick's drama and probably into his psychology as well.
We're talking today with Mike Aquilina, author of the new book, St. Patrick and His World. And how does he escape? What's the next step for Patrick?
Well, he's kidnapped, and he's taken to Ireland, and he's sold into slavery. Now, a little bit about Patrick before he was kidnapped, all right, because Patrick was kind of a punk. He was a teenager who was kind of rebellious. He didn't like to learn religion. He didn't want to learn religion, even though he came from a family that included clergy, generation after generation after generation. It must have been a devout family. Patrick wasn't interested in that, and he made that known. He was kind of in rebellion, and he said he didn't believe in the living God. That's the way he put it, which is a very sad place to be. So he is kidnapped, he's sold into slavery, and he's living out in the elements in Ireland, where there's rain and snow and then heat in the summer, and you're living out there taking care of livestock. Now, Patrick had been part of the aristocracy in his little town. Now, suddenly, he's nobody, and he's suffering, and it's miserable. And he remembers something. He remembers the prayers that his parents taught him. He remembers a little bit from the lessons that he tried to ignore in school. And suddenly he starts to say the prayers. And then he says them hundreds of times per day. And he starts to develop a relationship with the Trinity, God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This becomes the center of his devotion. He's always invoking the Trinity. So Patrick has this relationship with God, and it leads to some remarkable events, miracles, really. He starts to receive guidance from God. God gives him an affirmation that he's fasting well, and then God lets him know that he's going to be able to escape, and then God tells him, "Your ship has arrived." It's this wonderful service, of wake up calls for Patrick. I almost wish that I could get that kind of certain direction in life. It was an urgent mission, and he wanted him to move along.
Amazing. We're talking today with Mike Aquilina, author of St. Patrick and His World, a brand new book out from Scepter Publishers. And you did mention Patrick worked many miracles, and some of them were miracles of the highest sort, which you might say bringing people back from the dead. Talk a little bit about the things that Patrick worked when he was doing his ministry.
Well, there's all kinds of literature on Patrick. There are his two writings that are accepted by everyone. No one doubts that he wrote the Confession and the letter to the soldiers of Coroticus. And the reason why no one doubts those is because they're written in such bad Latin, right? And they've been preserved that way in bad Latin. Now, if someone were doing a pseudonymous work, kind of a work of fiction in the voice of a saint that tries to preserve the tradition of the saint, they would have written it out in good Latin.
That's right.
And if they didn't do it in the first generation, then in the next generation, someone would have refined the prose. Well, Patrick's writings, the two authentic writings, have never had that kind of service. Patrick patches together his writings with quotations from the scriptures in Latin. It's almost as if the only written language he knew was the Bible. And so he could tell his story by stringing phrases together and not caring whether they fit grammatically or not. Patrick's grammar is poor. He repeats himself. He meanders. He follows no chronology, and he never met a distraction he didn't like. So they're difficult to get through. But Patrick does tell some extraordinary stories. I've already talked about the locutions that he experienced. He also, when he was taken away by another group of ne'er-do-wells, and taken on an escape from Ireland, they land somewhere else, and it's not clear where they land. Some people think it was France. Some people think it was Britain. And they land there, and the place is desolate. There's no food there, and they're starving to death. They're afraid they're going to die, and they tell him to pray to his God to make something happen here. And Patrick prays, and suddenly there's this herd of swine that appear, and they eat like kings. Wonderful things happen to them there. Well, Patrick continues to be guided by locutions through the rest of his life, and it's a remarkable thing. He always seems to get the help he needs from God at the time he needs it.
Wonderful. We've been talking today with Mike Aquilina about St. Patrick and His World, a brand new book about the favorite saint of anyone who's got Irish ancestry, that is St. Patrick. And so we can talk, of course, about the conversion of Ireland. You mentioned this in your book as well. And you also talk about Patrick and his legacy. As we reflect on St. Patrick's Day, which is upon us now, what can we say when we think about what he did for Ireland and his legacy, even in our world today?
Well, Ireland was a tough place to convert. Okay, it was ruled by all of these petty kings, right? And they all made war with one another, and they weren't inclined to the kind of behavior that Christians should have. And yet Patrick managed to convert that place, baptizing thousands in short order, and then inspiring so many people from the aristocratic families to commit their lives to celibacy, virginity, and this was a remarkable thing. That first generation that was just so well placed, well formed, and ready to do anything for Jesus because they had that ferocity and that courage from the Irish ruling families. So it's interesting what happened immediately, that Ireland just became a place of monasteries. And then after that, the monks started to go back to Europe and re-Christianize Europe in the places where, with the Dark Ages descending, the church was really falling apart. Now, the Irish kept up the momentum from their conversion for so many centuries that even in the 19th century, they're taking to the United States to flee from persecution over there and from the famine that was plaguing them. And they come here onto our shores, and they really did found so much of the Catholic school system that we have today that became a model for schools the world over and imitated by secular schools and others. So they established the school system, they established the hospital system, and they make it thrive. I think that so much of Christianity in the world is what it is because of the missionary spirit of the Irish, and because of the momentum that they had from the time of their conversion, and that's all because of Patrick. And it's that energy that we feel in those two authentic writings, the Confession and the Letter to the Soldiers of Coroticus.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a fascinating look at St. Patrick, the favorite saint of anybody with an Irish background, myself included. And the name of the book is St. Patrick and His World by Mike Aquilina. Mike, where can we find out more about you, and where can we pick up this book, St. Patrick and His World? Well,
I'm online at fathersofthechurch.com. And you can find my books at the best price at CatholicBooksDirect.com, CatholicBooksDirect.com.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Mike Aquilina, for joining us ahead of St. Patrick's Day to talk about St. Patrick and his world. Thanks so much for joining us on today's program.
And thanks again for having me, Michael.
God bless. That was Mike Aquilina. Check out his book, St. Patrick and His World, from Scepter Publishers. What a fascinating look at that favorite saint of anybody who's Irish, and we might not even know that much about him, but Mike Aquilina breaks it all down, tells us what we need to know, and talks about his legacy going forward, even in today's world.
And that's all the time we have for today's program. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio. Check out the audio archives or download the free EWTN app. We'd like to thank our guest today, Scott L. Smith, author of Near-Death Experiences from Sophia Institute Press, and Mike Aquilina talking to us about St. Patrick. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. The next one airs on March 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I investigate the supernatural experiences of Benedicta Rencourel. In 1664, the Virgin Mary gave her messages about prayer for the conversion of sinners and visited her throughout the rest of her life. Check that one out, Explore Lay Low, airing on March 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And join me on pilgrimage. I'm doing a Jubilee Year pilgrimage July 28th through August 4th, going to Rome, Milan, Florence, and Turin. We'll see the Marian apparition sites there, visit the Duomo in Milan, visit Turin to see the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, where the Shrine of Turin is held, and walk in the footsteps of Pier Giorgio Frassati. We'll see the place where St. John Bosco had his famous visions. We'll go to Florence, and home to many great artists, of course, Dante, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, Botticelli, Donatello. We'll see their works of art along with the David, as well as the site of the apparition of the Virgin Mary to the 7 holy founders of the Servites. We'll finish up in Rome to see the many incredible sites around the Vatican, and finish with the canonization of one of the great modern saints, that's Pier Giorgio Frassati. People can go to pilgrimages.com/miraclehunter for more information and to sign up. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.